now that we are at the end of the year here, these are the articles you're going to be seeing from. I mean, I hope we see more of these articles. I'm probably going to be talking about them periodically as they pop up on social media. The article we're going to be talking about on today's podcast is going to be PSA's data on the most graded players. Basically, they put out a whole like blog about stuff that they graded this year. And it comes as no surprise, I think, to a lot of people that Victor Wembanyama, is number one. He was number one by like not double, but almost double. I mean, Michael Jordan was number two, which that's a very also. I find that a little bit surprising, to be completely honest, that Michael Jordan was number two. Um, Michael Jordan, or actually, sorry, let me go from the bottom of the list up to the top. So Ken Griffey Jr. with 77,000 cards graded, Anthony Edwards with 80,000 cards graded, Ellie De La Cruz with 83,000 cards graded, LeBron James with 89,000 cards graded, Kobe with 91,000, Anthony Richardson 107,000, Shohei Otani 211,000, CJ Stroud makes this list at number 3 at 223,000, Michael Jordan at 269,000, and then Victor Wembanyama at 407,000 total cards graded. I wrote about this on Sports Illustrated and broke down the numbers, and that means Wembanyama is in just this year is already extremely high on the top overall players because they also put out the number one cards that were graded as well. Which obviously that list is going to be extremely Wembanyama heavy. 6 of the 10 top 10 cards were Wembanyama cards. Obviously, the number one being Prism, which if you take Prism and then Prism Monopoly, it is the third highest PSA 10s in existence just within the first year of the products being out. Prism Basketball came out in February, so we are literally less than a year. Wembanyama has already has so many of these cards graded. It really is pretty. It's pretty remarkable how people are getting these cards graded. I don't really know if I don't know. It's the one thing I sort of can't figure out is like why does he have so many cards graded? Like I get that he is probably going to be one of the better players from that draft, and I get he's this you know probably the most exciting player in the sports card world or even in the sports world since Zion, realistically. But like for there to be this many cards graded, like I don't know. I'm wondering like he already has more PSA 10s than Luca and Zion, which that's an insane statistic already to say within 1 year. Not even because Luca and Zion, I think Luca he has had a pretty steady the past couple of years it probably hasn't been as high, but he's had a pretty steady rise in his PSA 10s. Zion obviously in that first year had some pretty high PSA 10s, but in the first year of a player playing, like I said, Wembanyama already has more PSA 10s than both of those players. And if you're looking at just PSA 10s, I believe he's like number 8 in the top 10 of total graded PSA 10s. And like I said, if you were to include this is for Prism, sorry, this is for Prism PSA 10s. If you were to include the Monopoly Prism PSA 10s, that adds, which I believe the regular PSA 10s was 24,000, and the regular the Monopoly was 10,000. So all of these numbers, again, suffice to say, I don't exactly know, like, it really, I don't know. I'm not sure how or why so many people are getting his cards graded. Realistically, I think it really shows that the rookie class has such a determining factor on how popular sports cards are that it makes me rethink when things are a little bit slow, why they're slow. I think when things are negative within the industry, it's very easy to nitpick here and there why things are going badly or what else is negative. But when things are positive, again, I think it's very easy to spin stories and make them look very positive. And I think it really is just going to come down to like, what does the rookie class look like that year? For basketball, the rookie class this year, other than the excitement of Bronny, but that really was I don't know. I'm not sure if that was manufactured excitement or what exactly you could call that, but I don't know. The Bronny excitement was more the media doing stories about LeBron and Bronny, and I think because it gets clicks for sure. But I don't know. Zach Edey this year could be exciting, and maybe it's like maybe Wembanyama was just so far and away the rookie of the year last year, and people looked at this year's draft, and it was so much worse, I guess, from a top heavy perspective, where the draft might end up being a very even keeled, like very regular draft. But like to have the Wembanyama and also to have Wembanyama go to the Spurs, I think that also has a very significant I think that's a very significant team to go to because of how well they have developed foreign stars and even stars from France specifically, like Tony Parker. So I think all of those factors probably led to Wembanyama having all of these crazy cards graded or the crazy number of cards. Like I said, he had 6 of the top 10 specific cards and was number one. And if you take like for example, if you take out, let's just say below the top five, from if you take Kobe to Ken Griffey Jr., he basically had more than those players combined. He had almost double number two, basically double number four, which was Shohei, and then had 4 times the amount as number five, which was Anthony Richardson. Which that is another going to be an interesting case study on a player who got hurt and then had kind of a bad season. And I guess I don't know. We'll see. Sort of, he's the season for the NFL is over. So, and he has kind of had a little bit of a resurgence. But again, I think because he may be playing a little bit better, he's going to have another year potentially of speculation of his name, realistically. I think that's just when you're looking at Anthony Richardson overall. If you're looking to buy any of his cards, I don't know if this offseason is going to be that good of an option realistically, because I think he's the type of player that got hurt, had in his rookie season, had a fine rookie season, really didn't play up to his potential in his second season, and then kind of has this little bit of a resurgence. But overall, Wembanyama tops that PSA list, and I'm gonna be. I mean, I don't know. I think he probably ends up being number in the top 10 for sure for 2025 as well, because we still have 2023 rookie products for Wembanyama coming out for top. So there's no way people aren't going to be grading those. And I just think that with the amount of prism there is, that I think that there is still to be ripped. If I'm going to be completely honest, like I don't think this is always a question that I have is what's the percentage of cards that there are versus cards that are graded? Because also has a 60% gem rate, the Prism card. So it roughly had 40,000 total graded cards with a 60% gem rate, comes out to around 24,000 Prism graded. So my question will always be, what is the percentage of how many of those cards are graded versus how many exist? And I mean, I even too, like, we don't know how many of those cards were regraded. We don't know we'll never know that for sure either. So I don't know if the exact percentage will ever be something that people will know one way or the other. But I think that's always something that I'll look at and say, well, like if there's 40,000 of those cards graded, like I don't know, are there 100,000 out there? Like, are there 200,000 out there? I guess we'll never, I don't know. The sports card companies will never come out with this information. And on one hand, I understand why they would never come out with this information, especially Panini. Topps does a fine job with their odds and stuff. But for Panini, they don't really have any odds. Like they're never going to come out with this information. Topps, on the other hand, may potentially one day come out with information. I think it should actually be 5 to 10 years down the road. It should be information they should come out with. Do I think they will? Probably not necessarily. But like when I look at the 24,000 number, do I think that is more the sports card industry deciding that they want to grade more of one specific player? I think that I think that there would be an interesting study done of the rise in breaking and then the rise in how often those breakers are working with grading companies, because that also could be a thing. And that's also that's not even including, this is more of a PSA article. That's not even to include like how many of those cards were graded by any of the other companies potentially. The other interesting piece of information they put in here was that Caitlin Clark was number 11, just off the top 10 list. I'm glad that they included that information. Again, there are more cards for her than I think we really know, and that we really are I think that there are more, there's a higher, the demand for her cards I think is higher than the supply of her cards still, and I think she is going to be a very interesting player to watch throughout her career and how these cards do. Wembanyama may be another example, but it may even just be that we're seeing a change in the way that sports cards, just a change in general. I think we've seen grading, the rise of grading, but I think now what the consumers are saying is that we don't want to buy raw cards, or the people that are buying raw cards are getting them raw to grade. So I think overall we're going to see a big shift, and maybe even these marketplaces not accepting raw cards, or saying, hey, if you are going to put in raw cards, you have to get them graded first before you can sell them on the platform. Whether that's with PSA or one of the other grading companies, I just think that grading nowadays is becoming so much more important in the industry, and is just one of the things that, unfortunately, if you don't like grading, it's something that you're probably not going to be getting, that you're not going to get away with, or that you're not going to not see it in the industry, I think is maybe the final point that I'm trying to make here. So I think this will be the last episode before Christmas. It is I guess it is Christmas Eve. I mean, it's weird. Christmas being on a Wednesday is very odd. But I think I'm probably going to take Christmas off. I'm sure if Danny's listening, I'm sure he's probably fine with that. If you're not, Danny, then text me and I will do an episode for Christmas. I'm not just at my house, so it's really not even that big of a deal. But either way, some news that has happened. This is probably going to be like 3 or 4 stories, depending on how deep I get into some of these stories. So over the weekend, REI, which I believe is Robert Edward Auctions, they're one of the bigger auction houses. They announced they're going to be doing their own marketplace. And on one hand, I like that more companies are trying to get into this type of business. I think it is one of probably the more growing sections of the industry, is the ability to have all of your cards somewhere that isn't at your house, that gives you the ability to buy and sell without getting your cards. I wonder if on that, and maybe it's not even, maybe this second part of the second part of the concept isn't really going to be as relevant, because I think the other thing that I've been thinking over the past few years is maybe there is too many marketplaces, and that could be affecting the price of sports cards. Because you know, I look back at when sports cards were in their crazy boom that they had. And although there were other places that were popular, for the most part, I would say like Golden, PWCC, and PWCC relatively new because they started their own kind of marketplace and got kicked off of eBay. But then eBay, um, it just felt like there weren't as many places to buy and sell cards, which then led to a lot of the publicity of certain cards really being directed towards one thing. And you don't have to worry about like, there's a big card selling on Golden. There's a big card selling on Fanatics. There's a big card selling through Heritage. There's a big card selling through Robert Edward Auctions. There's a big card being sold on eBay. I mean, it's really big cards being sold on all. It's just, I'm wondering if that is affecting the prices in a negative way, because people just like don't know. Uh, they just don't know whether a card is selling or not. I don't know exactly. The next piece of the story that I think, or the next story that I think is very interesting, is that somebody posted on the blowout forum, and then someone brought that post over to Twitter, which I think I'm pretty sure, I don't know if I'll have the article done by the time this podcast is out, but I'm gonna be writing about this on SI. Is there one of the O-Pee-Chee PSA 10 Gretzky's has been deactivated. And that brings the population from 3 to 2, I believe. Um, and I think PSA deactivated the certification. And I forget if it goes from 2 to 1. I think it goes from 3 to 2, if I'm not mistaken. But the PSA, they deactivated the certification number. And I don't 100% know why that's the case. From reading some of the comments, some people are saying that like this specific one, going back and looking at the card that surfaced online, they were saying that the card was like not really, it probably shouldn't have been a PSA 10. Like out of the PSA 10s, it was probably the worst eye appeal, and that realistically, if it were to be regraded, that it would get like an 8. Now, Opeachy is pretty notorious for having pretty bad edges. So if there's a chance that it got trimmed or something, I don't really know. But that card's been deactivated, which that's in my opinion one of the holy grails. I think in hockey cards for sure, it's probably the most important card. But I would argue that it's probably one of the more important cards just in the grand scheme of sports cards in general. So it's big that a one of the very few PSA 10s has now been deactivated, and now we are down to only one or two. um, in 2024 Diamond Icons, and then in 2025 Series 1, Barry Bonds is going to be getting autographs, and he's going to be making his return to Tops for the first time in 7 years. This is also could be big. I saw some people talking about that. That means he could be in MLB The Show potentially as well, and that would obviously be he would be probably one of the best players in that game, I would imagine, as like some sort of legend. Um, and all the different versions of him. Like, you'd have the one of him on the Pirates as a rookie. You'd have obviously the home run, the 72 home run year, all of these things. I think this is a big deal for collectors because, unfortunately, Barry Bonds never going to go into the Hall of Fame, but he is definitely one of the best players of all time. Some might even say he is the best player of all time. I don't know if I don't know if I would put him in that conversation, but in a top 5 conversation, he's definitely in that top 5. So he's going to be in those two products in 2025 Series 1. So that is a big deal to get that name back into the product. Not really card related, but could be potentially, is that EA and 2K are reportedly in talks to bring back college basketball. Obviously, as they saw the success, I talked about this probably like a week or two ago, probably. That the NCAA football game was the highest grossing sports video game of all time. And I think it would be very smart for EA and EA and 2K. Wait, so it would probably be one or the other, but one of them would be bringing the game back, which I think would be very smart. There's also I think I'm going to wait for this topic probably till after Christmas because there's still another day on this poll. But their Tops put out their poll basically for the top card of the year. And there are like 2,000 votes, which I'm surprised there aren't more, but I'm going to talk about that probably after Christmas because the poll's not over. There's still 14 hours at this point, which when you're listening to this, to this, the poll may be over, but um, as I'm recording, there's still 14 hours. So there's that. The one of one Patrick Mahomes Black Finite Prism rookie, Prism autograph, one of one, has been listed on eBay. It's been listed for 2.5 million. And do I think it could sell for 2.5 million? I would say I maybe think it could. I'm surprised that they're going to eBay for this card. Like, something that I have heard in the past, like there was at one point the Pete Alonso Superfractor autograph from Bowman was on eBay, and it was listed for like 500K. Like, even during when sports cards were booming, I posted about that on Instagram, and everyone was like, "Yeah, that person's pretty notorious for just posting their cards and not really wanting to sell them, just posting them at a higher value than actually what they're worth." Is this a $2 million card? There was for Mahomes, his one of one National Treasures RPA sold right before the National in 2021 for $4.3 million. That card was then at the National as well. Do I think that this card will sell for 2.5? I think it could. But I am surprised that it didn't get sent to one of the other bigger auction houses. Um, a card of that value and of that size, I don't. I wouldn't be comfortable, like, and this is my own opinion. I wouldn't be comfortable having that card in my house at all. I would want that somewhere. I would want that in one of the vaults, whether it's whichever one. I would want that there because I just don't want to even like be close to that card if I know it's worth, it's probably not a $2 million card realistically. I mean, realistically, it's probably in the 1 to 1.5. So we won't know what the price of this card is or what it's going to be until either the person accepts an offer, or someone literally just goes to eBay and says, "Hey, I'm going to spend $2 million on eBay," which that's like, I don't see how that. I don't even, if you're eBay, I would even, if I'm eBay, I'm not even sure I want that card on eBay, like realistically, like, because then I feel like there's so much, I don't know, there's so much that could go wrong with that card being on eBay that I wouldn't feel comfortable with that being on there. And the last piece of info, the last topic here for the show, so I think Thursday and Friday's episodes, I have the two topics. But I figure those two topics I'll just wait. Which one was the card of the year? And then the other one was an interesting conversation about, was this one of the best rookie classes 2024 we've seen in quite some time? So that's going to be a topic. If there's no other huge news, those are probably the two topics you're going to hear me talk about on the next couple episodes. And the crazy thing here is that with this last topic is, so Darren Ravel's website put out a article about the Ricky Henderson rookie, which unfortunately Ricky Henderson passed, which is a very, very sad. But they put out an article that said it's very hard to get a PSA 10. And then in the thing, they said it's impossible to get a PSA 10, yet there's no absolute reason why. And then PSA, I mean, I don't know if someone at PSA doesn't like Darren Ravel, because they literally just came over the top and like dunked all over him with this response. Like, they really gave such a detailed, specific response of why you can't, like, it's PSA 10s are so hard to come by, that somebody has to have some sort of vendetta against him, because they put out like a 4 paragraph explanation of why it's so hard to find a PSA 10 or it's why it's so hard to grade a PSA 10 of the 1980 tops Ricky Henderson rookie, basically saying stuff along the lines of that there are basically basically that, like, the card itself is not necessarily hard, but there's a lot of defects with the way that the card is, because of the white border, because of different issues on the card, and with it being from 1980, like, that's also another issue. And then they said at the end, we've seen a noticeably large volume of cards come to PSA since 2020, especially since more collectors have dug into their old collections, which further sh- shrinks the gem rate. And then they also said finding copies with good centering, clean edges, and sharp corners is not as difficult, but the card, as it is to find an example without noticeable print defects on the front. Wait, sorry, I'm actually reading this tweet in reverse. I should have just read from the beginning. I'm reading the third paragraph down now. As was the case with many vintage sets with darker areas on the surface, this creates a higher likelihood that the white snowy look print dots or yellow fisheye defects to show up as highly visible on the portion of the surface, affecting the overall eye appeal of the card. So they really went into some detail here. I was pretty surprised that they did this, but again, the more information we can get, the better. So shout out to PSA for putting out information here. And especially on such a significant card in such a significant time period, I think it's good for any company that's going to come out and be more transparent with the stuff that they're doing in the sports card industry. Most years Topps does come out with this list here. Also, I hope everybody who celebrated Christmas yesterday had a great Christmas. If you got some sports cards, hope you got some great pulls. I suppose I got some of the Call of Duty trading cards. Shout out to Upper Deck for those, which is kind of cool. The audience is, I'm wondering how big that audience is, like, of sports cards and Call of Duty fans. It's probably just me. I'm sure you've got the Call of Duty fans who are going to get into cards because of maybe this product. That would be really cool. But either way, open up those packs. Those are pretty cool. But so, like I said, every year Topps does some sort of poll, basically kind of trying to figure out what people think is the card of the year. And I mean, they choose the cards, so I guess it's kind of like if there were any like they and at the end of the poll they do end up saying like other like or what did we miss? But yeah, they only got like 4 replies I believe on this one, which let's see what people even said. Some people said yeah, there wasn't really much here. Somebody said there was a George Brett, Bobby Wood Jr. Superfractor, which was kind of cool. But so here are the 4 cards that they included in the poll, and then I'll kind of discuss the poll itself and which ones I think potentially probably would have been the one. So I think feels like number one, obviously the Paul Skeens 1 of 1 patch card, probably the most viral card of the whole entire year. Um, that one just had so much staying power from a media and content creation perspective. Uh, some of my top articles from this year on SI actually were about that card. So shout out to Paul Skeens, shout out to Tops for that one. A 1 of 1 from Tops Dynasty Black that had a Otani and it had the logo from the 50 home runs and 50 stolen base game pants. That's a 1 of 1 Black Dynasty logo man auto from there. Another one, which these are not in order, these are just the order that they put them in. And then, like I said, I'll talk about the poll after I talk about the cards. The Curry LeBron Durant triple auto from the Olympics is on this list, which this card is going to have a very interesting history behind it because no one knows where it is. And the fact that Tops is really still kind of promoting it, like, that means that they know that someone has it. That means they know that it either has been pulled or they know that they know that they sent the card out. Um, so they know where that card is. And then the last one is a Yamani or Lomani Yomal 1 of 1 Tops Chrome Superfractor autograph. He is a soccer player for Barcelona, and I'm glad that they included some soccer stuff in there. I mean, it's always good, I think, for them to include the diversity of the different products that they have. And this was probably their top soccer card this year, realistically. I I don't know. I think people were complaining potentially that this card shouldn't have had the rookie logo because he had made his debut in a different year. So I don't know. I wasn't really expecting that one to do very well, and I was fairly right about that realistically. So the way that the poll went was the Yamal card that was 6%. The rest of them were all fairly close. So then we had actually a tie between the Skeens and the Curry LeBron Durant autograph, 28.8 points. And then the card that got the most amount of votes in this poll that Tops put out was the Otani card, 36.3%. And again, I think with Tops, I think people, if the Durant card, if either of those other 2 cards had been pulled, I think that those probably would have. I think people would have been more likely to vote for those. Which, like I said, I mean, it's really only a less than a 10% difference between the two. So I mean, it really was like almost a tie here between those 3 cards. Because if I were to pick between those ones, I would probably go with I would probably go with the triple auto if I'm going to be honest. How I would order them is the Yamal card would be 4th. I would go the Otani card would be 3rd. The Skeens card would be 2nd, and then the first card would be that let LeBron Durant Curry triple auto. And I think it's because with that card specifically is going to mark a very interesting point in Tops's um in the industry, in Tops's lineage, maybe potentially, as you could say, because we're going to be getting basketball soon. It's not a licensed basketball card from an NBA perspective. They were all on the Olympic team. And I don't know, there's a potential that they may never play on the Olympic team again. So I know that like LeBron and Curry were kind of debating whether they wanted to play. They wanted to come back for one more. Durant's a little younger, I believe, than them. I know LeBron was drafted in 2003. Durant is 2006 or maybe 2007. So there's probably Durant probably could play one more if he wanted to. Tatum, yeah, I'm not even going to get into Tatum on the Team USA or whatever, but I think it's going to be an interesting card in the history of Tops in the history of basketball cards as Top starts to get back into it, because it is, although it's not, like I said, an NBA card, it is licensed. It does have the USA jerseys, and it's probably going to be one of one of the last cards or USA cards for all of those players. Now, I believe the non-auto has been pulled, and I think that's sold through Golden a couple months ago or like a month or two ago. I know the Curry one of one auto was also pulled, I believe. So again, I think that card is probably the most significant out of this list. If I were to include any others, I mean, I think obviously the Otani one that had like the 600,000 total graded, total ordered. That's going to be a big one. I think that maybe was left off this list for the other Otani card, because I think this other Otani card is it has the game worn memorabilia, which really, the fact that they can say that it was from the specific game, I think is a pretty big deal. And hopefully they continue to do this. Like the Dick's Sporting Goods patches, the napkin patches that everyone hates. I really hope that Tops and Fanatics can figure out a way to get rid of those in the industry, because it's it delegitimizes the, I think, the card industry from the standpoint of like, if someone's pulling a patch, like why is it that, why would they even care if they're pulling a patch if it's not a patch from an actual card? I think that's one way I look at it. But I think then I mean, you look at the Paul Skeens card also, and that's obviously the debut patch, which I am thinking that Tops is probably going to, they're probably going to try and expand that patch idea, because I don't think that was like an MLB idea. That was like a Tops and Fanatics idea, which obviously then Fanatics takes over the jersey, the licensing for the jersey. So they're the ones making the jerseys as well. So maybe they do have a little bit of say on what's going on. But when they debuted it, I think Nike was still making the jerseys. So this year, obviously, Fanatics, there was a big controversy at the beginning of spring training where like you could see through the jerseys and stuff like that. Like you could like see you could see through the jerseys and the pants. So I'll leave that to the imagination what that probably led to, unfortunately. But that card, the debut patch, I think that is probably just going to lead to more patches being created for different reasons, for not just debut. And I mean, I hope that they kind of continue the concept of putting that patch into products where everyone can get them. Because I think that helps Topps Chrome, even though I don't think Topps Chrome necessarily needed the help, but uh, it makes the card semi obtainable to the average person. Now, granted, they're super almost impossible to pull. So maybe it's not as obtainable as I would describe here, but I think putting them in that type of product makes the card more obtainable. And I don't know. I mean, the last card here, the one of one super fractor autograph, anytime there's going to be a one of one, that's going to be the big card. Like, I don't necessarily, I think Tops including this one over some other player, I think is a big deal. I think Barcelona also having, such a big staying power on that card is going to be a big deal. But just, overall, those were the cards that Tops picked as their top cards of the year, and the poll I broke down a little bit on today's episode. So last episode of the week, this week, as we finish up the holiday. Well, actually, I guess next week is technically also New Year's, so holiday season isn't over yet, I guess. One update before we get into the episode that I think is going to be important is Ryan Hoge from PSA, like the president of PSA, tweeted back at the person who brought the thread over from Blowout that one of the O-Pee-Chee PSA 10 Gretzky's had been deactivated. And I don't know. I mean, I guess in theory, I guess I kind of did jump the gun on the story. Like I put the story, I feel like it was important to put this out because it wasn't really talked about and there wasn't really any updates from anyone. That I mean, I guess we would be the updates on SIs in theory. So like I put the article about the O-Pee-Chee Wayne Gretzky, the one of the two, which I thought there was three. There's only two. One of the PSA 10s got deactivated, and uh it was the one that sold for $3.7 million. So maybe I don't know. I don't think I jumped the gun. I mean, it was a story that I think was important. And I don't know, maybe the story wouldn't have came out if potentially I hadn't written, or maybe he wouldn't have talked about it on Twitter. But apparently someone had sent in a a fake version of the card, is what he's saying on Twitter, with the same certification number. And so they deactivated the certification number because they were sending it in to get it put it in a new holder. And that led to them realizing it was a fake card, and which led to the certification number being deactivated. So that is good news. I think that in all of these years, it did seem kind of odd that the card would just be like deactivated for what seemed like it didn't seem like there was a reason for it. And a $3 million card, almost a $4 million card being deactivated feels like it's a pretty big story. Now, obviously, it's good that they were able to catch this. And now that we have that update, um, we know why it was deactivated, but they said that it's going to be activated again soon. So the certification number is all on Twitter and stuff, so you can check that out. I'll be periodically checking on. I'm sure they said it's going to be in the next like day or so that'll be up. But the main topic for today that we're going to discuss is about the 2024 rookie class, 2023-2024, because obviously baseball it's going to be 2024. It's all within the same year. Same with WNBA, all within the same year. But hockey, basketball, football happen over the course of 2 years. So the in Ali De La Cruz technically rookie. I don't know exactly, but we're looking at like the 2023-24 rookie classes essentially. So is it the best one of all time? That's what kind of the discussion was brought up. Eric Whiteback, aka Collectibles Guru on Twitter, put out it was Shroud, Ellie De La Cruz, Connor Bedard, Caitlin Clark, and then Victor Wembanyama. Which Victor Wembanyama on in any class may potentially make this one of the best ones of all time, and actually even Bedard as well. I mean, Bedard really has the potential, I think, to be one of the greats within this league. I mean, I know he's such a young player, but like from that young age and then having as much hype as he did, like I would argue that Bedard had as much hype within hockey as Wembanyama did within basketball. And again, Wembanyama had, I believe it was 42 points and then like 18 rebounds on Christmas Day. So that's, I mean, really incredible, an incredible performance here. Shroud, fine, he's doing okay. He obviously is losing his best receiver. That's not great. And then so Skeens also you could probably put him in there. I'm surprised he didn't put Skeens in there versus Ellie De La Cruz, but whatever. Not really. It's kind of nitpicking. And then Caitlin Clark all within this same year. So it's feels like it's rare that we see all the four major sports. Oh, and then Yamal, who I talked about on yesterday's podcast about the superfractor from Topps Chrome, the Barcelona soccer player. So if you were to include him in there also, it's a pretty strong rookie class from this past year. And again, I think each player, I think at the level, like I don't know. Realistically, Wembanyama, Caitlin Clark, Connor Bedard, those three players alone, I think would make if any of those three players were to be the main rookie in that year, you could probably argue that it's one of the best rookie classes of all time. I would maybe look at the 2018 class with Acuna and Juan Soto and Josh Allen and Luca. I mean, that one's in retrospect, that one's also extremely strong. 2017, you could argue with Mahomes and then Tatum potentially as well. Like, but I think overall, if you look at the grand scheme of every single sport in the US, like well, and I guess maybe soccer isn't necessarily in the US, but like if you look at those four major sports within the US, and I'm including WNBA in there as well, MLS didn't really have anybody that was like a superstar that would end up making this list. But the one of the other points was that there was almost $1 million worth of sales between those 4 or 5 players. A group whose rookie cards totaled $980,000 in this from year over year from when the cards came out. I would guess that's probably the numbers or the time frame that they're using there. So I do wonder, and this is something I've talked about on other episodes with the importance of rookies. Like, are we in like sorry, I'm trying to formulate the exact thought here to make sure I'm correct. Um, I think that the sports card market is very dependent on rookies. So having all of these rookies in products really, I think, makes the market much stronger and makes more people much more interested. Now we are down from previous years. But I'm wondering if this is now like another high we're getting to potentially, and we're going to see if there's not as good of a rookie class potentially, like this upcoming year. Like if the NBA rookie class ends up being like really not very good, like is that going to hurt the market much more than the good rookie classes help the market? And I think one thing for that argument is that when you have these types of rookie classes, people are going to spend the money on boxes and they're going to spend money within the industry, presumably to try and get some of these cards. Now, I think if you're looking for boxes, we have maybe never been a time other than like the junk wax era, like the peak junk wax era, which even then it's like, at least most of those products were all like fairly base heavy. Like you would probably get some of the rookies from there. But I think other than maybe the junk wax era, I don't know if we've ever been in a time where the return on investment, and again, I don't like using the word investment, but return on investment in sports card boxes has to be at some sort of all time low, realistically. I just don't see how you can be trying to buy boxes to pull any of these rookies. Realistically, I think buying singles is, and I don't know, again, these are all kind of, if I don't know if these things are correlated necessarily. Like if buying single cards is more profitable, it's got to be more profitable than buying boxes. But like, is it like the complete and total opposite where buying boxes is so wildly unprofitable that it's like buying singles is like just so much more insanely profitable? Like the answer is yes there, but I'm just wondering if it's like if those two things are on a scale. And I also wonder if the specific rookie class we're seeing now is so much is increasing people's value in the market. I think that's kind of what I'm trying to say. Or if if the rookies are increasing people's viewing of sports cards, because if there's other years where the rookies just aren't good, like I don't know, like the Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota rookie class, like I think we'll always have, well, actually, that's probably a bad example because I think those two players were pretty hyped up. Um, I don't know of an exact year of when maybe people didn't really care as much about rookies. Um, but I think maybe the 2019 rookie class could be another one potentially with Zion, and then that one also was like the Burrow, Justin Herbert era. Also in that 2018, you have Sam Darnold, who has having a bit of a career resurgence here. Baker in that draft class, but the question I think that I'll probably leave sort of this podcast with, and something to think about as you're heading into the weekend, is like how are people preparing for a potential decrease in the popularity and interest in the market? I think from one standpoint, it's okay to think that way. On the other standpoint, I mean, I think it's just there's ebbs and flows in every single market. So it's like to overreact potentially one way or the other um, to how rookies are doing probably isn't the best move. Like making the sound decision for maybe buying rookies 2 or 3 years out when the prices are going to be much more stable. Like you don't want to be the person buying the Mac Jones $3,000 PSA 10 Donruss, but then at the same time, you also don't want to be the person who potentially missed out on, I don't know, any like let's just say let's just say Mac Jones does come back. Like let's not miss out on the $5-10 PSA 10 that card probably is today. And I think ultimately it'll come down to the secondary market and how that's doing. But I also think it's going to be important for people to really taper their expectations on where the market should be and just allow the market to be what it is. I guess is that's probably one way of thinking about it.